Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. As always, support the podcast. Best way you can do that is by becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack. Every week, I do a roundup of the world's news in video format. It takes me about an hour and a half, and so that's for paid supporters only. I also organize every week or two or three a group Zoom call with supporters where we shoot the breeze on world events. You can donate. You can purchase a consult through the website. Do check out all of my affiliates which are listed in the description below, as well as on the website. Some of the latest news is Rockfin. Rockfin is dying, so you'll no longer find Geopolitics and Empire on Rockfin. We've been kicked off of Rockfin. Also, a reminder, we've got the Spanish podcast as well, Geopolitics and Empire en Espanol. That's on the website. So those are interviews I conduct in Spanish, but they have English subtitles. Leave a podcast review if you haven't already. Joining us is Fox Green for the first time. I've had him on TNT Radio, and this is for his first time here on the podcast. He's an independent filmmaker, journalist, and artist fighting the information war against the forces of entropy and anti-humanism. He's an ardent advocate for peaceful cooperation between the brother nations of the U.S., China, and Russia. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, Fox.
Thank you, Hervoy. So great to be on your podcast. It's been a while since we spoke, so this is great.
Yeah, it's been, I think, a couple times you've been, I think, on my old TNT show. It's your first time on the podcast. And I very much enjoy your work. And maybe for people who haven't heard of you or seen you previously, whatever you want to tell us about yourself and your work.
Sure. I mean, it's been a journey. I'm a normie, unlike most people in media who are kind of like state agent intelligence operators. Maybe the two of us we're the only ones who aren't these days. But there's very few people who are kind of just regular people exploring what's going on, right? Because most of us can tell there's something going on. And, I've been doing space communes like 5 years now, and just kind of digging deeper and deeper and starting from a local level and learning what is going on, not just in my area, but in my state, in my nation, in the world, and just contextualizing my place within world history and trying to do what I can with my time on this planet in the best way possible. So that's what Space Commune is. It's my own personal experiment, my partner, just to figure out what the heck is going on in the world, right?
Yeah, you guys do great work. You do write-ups, articles. There's short films and documentaries, and I really much like what you guys are doing there. And you did a great recent piece, as well as a lecture. And your recent piece is titled "Breaking America: How Bioregionalism Seeks to Dismantle the Nation States." And you talk about Kirkpatrick. I don't know if I get his last name right. Sale.
Yeah, I think it's just Kirkpatrick Sale. So very strange and annoying name to say over and over again, but yeah.
Yeah, Kirkpatrick. And some of the themes that you touch on in that article and your research, your lecture, is stuff that I'm obsessed with on Geopolitics and Empire. The theme of world government, of course, technocracy, and the occult. And maybe to start, so I don't know where to start here, but maybe we could look at let's just, if you want to just tell us an intro to that research that you've been doing, because again, their goal is to dismantle the nation state and bring in world government.
Well, I think what you're hinting at, and I think what I found was the most interesting part in researching this piece, was at the very end, a man named Leopold Kohr, who wrote this book called, I have it open here. I always forget names. He wrote The Breakdown of Nations, right? So he wrote this book, which was a precursor to the E.F. Schumacher Small is Beautiful movement, and was actually a new forward was written by Kirkpatrick Sale himself. So he's kind of this figurehead of this ideology that is a very Keynesian ideology that emerged kind of in the post-World War II era, which is this small is beautiful ideology that makes it seem like it's fighting globalism, but in reality is working hand in hand with it. Right. So the real giveaway in Leopold Kohr's book, The Breakdown of Nations, is that he says that the best example of this small is beautiful ideology was the Roman Empire and its small feudalistic city-states, and that the reason why these small city-states are good is because they're easy to control. So it is that slogan, right? Divide and conquer. That's a real slogan that came from somewhere where people had an idea of how to conquer the world, right? People throughout the world was to divide them, and then they're more easily controlled. So this idea that we need to break things down and decentralize goes, a lot of the conventional wisdom says that, oh, that's a way to avoid globalism, right? This homogeneity, this one world authoritarian order, when in reality, it actually works hand in hand with it. And that's the biggest swindle, I think, that we're dealing with right now, as people are getting angrier and angrier at the Klaus Schwabs and the World Economic Forum for very legitimate reasons, but they're being kind of handed the wrong answers, which they think is a resistance to the one world order, but is actually going to make it easier for the one world order to take over.
There are so many threads to pull on here. I want to read a quote from your article where you write, Sale and the bioregional movement at large sees mankind as an animal and would have the nation state dismantled, subjugated by localist feudal city-states, subjected to a supranational world government, the very thing that Cole warns us against, which puts us purposefully on the path towards societal collapse. If someone had Malthusian convictions and saw human beings as a virus on Mother Gaia, would it be far-fetched to say they might want to orchestrate a collapse on purpose to cull the human species? And we've been seeing, as of late, these movements, right? You've got this guy Balaji, they're talking about network states, cyber states. They're building these sort of private city-states, 15-minute cities, right? In Honduras, there's a project. In different states across the U.S., they've got these projects where they make these deals with the national government or local states or governments where they create their own laws and rules, and people come in and they live there. Or you've got the other versions, which I think you can tell us more about, bioregionalism, where this agora idea. And I think we have to be careful, right? Where there are well-meaning, I think, versions of trying to do this, right? And then there's kind of what you're alluding to, where the elites want us to follow this sort of, they're selling us this decentralized model, which is actually playing into their hand. And so if you want to, thoughts here, or if you want to tell us more about what they're trying to do, what is bioregionalism? Well,
with any of these ideas, if they were all bad and all evil, nobody would, they wouldn't resonate with anyone. It'd be a waste of time, right? So they have to pick up threads of stuff that feels, right to people. There's something about it that feels that this feels right to me. And I was into localism. It's very much an idea that is promoted around my area. And I'm a local business owner. I love the idea of employing local people and strong local economies. But not to the point where we get rid of our federal government, right? Because these things go hand in hand. We need the big to help the little and the little to support the big. And it's a reciprocal relationship. None of these things are really like the solution, right? Everyone's looking for the formula. Oh, if we get rid of the big thing and we only do the little thing, and these mathematical formulas, the answer is never going to be in a mathematical formula in that way. What we need is to be oriented in the right way, which is in a way that sees human life as valuable, and as creative and as a good force in the universe that is working towards what is already here, right? If people believe in creation, or whether they believe in Mother Gaia, the universe is a creative entity that we are part of, and we're able to participate in that creative work. And all of these economic, this economic mumbo jumbo nonsense, at the end of the day, what they all do is they say, no, human beings are actually a virus on the planet. We're outstripping our resources. You get back to this Malthusian ideology. which does not recognize what is different about human beings than any other animal on the planet, is that we're able to innovate, we're able to create, we're able to surpass our limits to growth. And that's what, whether you're left or right wing, the localist idea, I know, appeals to a lot of right wing people too. And ecology and conservation, it all started out as right wing ideology. I mean, you look at somebody like Madison Grant, who was one of the founders of the ecological movement and environmentalism. And Hitler says Madison Grant wrote my Bible, So these are ideas that started out as very supposedly right wing, but then went to left wing during the hippie movement. And now you can see the same ideology on the left and the right. And that's what I was trying to talk about in my talk about the transhumanist movement, right? You see somebody like Elon Musk, who just a few years ago had, the socialist rose in his profile, and he was very left-wing coded, and now he's very right-wing coded. So all that stuff is meant to kind of keep people just thinking about the moment and not considering the full context of human history and how these people can shape public opinion and change it very quickly in order to kind of get people distracted from the real issues.
Yeah, and you write in your article, you say bioregionalism purports to combine biology with geographic regionality. And, I feel like the elites, they can use anything, any technology or idea or pathway to twist it towards their agenda. I mean, in life, this is how there are things that are, I used when I used to teach, guns or knives are neutral objects, right? I remember G. Edward Griffin say, world government in and of itself is not a bad idea. The question is, what kind of world government? When I talk about a knife, I use it to put butter on my bread, or you could stab someone, right?
Yeah,
A gun. And so a lot of these ideas, but they're just maybe your further thought on this idea of world government and where they're taking us. Because for me, a lot of the action around us, those are pretexts for the construction of this endgame of world government. They talk about the nuclear threat, they talk about the health threat, they talk about AI threat, and they say, look at all these threats. We need to create AI global governance. We need to create, pandemic global governance. We need to construct these international organizations that are going to control everything from the top down. And so, before going on, any just final thoughts on this project that they're trying to push forth?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is if you learn about the history of the United Nations, is it was a project by FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and he wanted to get together after the war with Stalin and with China and with England and create a world government, the United Nations. That was his baby, right? That would create a situation where everyone respected each other, where everyone came to the table to discuss world ideas and made sure nothing got out of hand, right? Because you need cooperation when you're in an interconnected world, right? But it needs to be aligned with national sovereignty. And this is the problem, is that the one world government wants to eschew nations, right? Again, we return to the title of this book, The Breakdown of Nations. So the nation state, as conceived, by the American, the founding of America, is an idea of a sovereign people whose government serves the people, right? And so you need national sovereignty. You need people who are intelligently running their government. They're not appealing to, oh, well, the king is just going to hopefully run things the way we want. And if we suck up to him, he'll be very nice to us and give us a pittance and, basically be pets, be property to a ruling class, right? We want to be individuals who are willfully organizing with each other for the greater good to preserve individual liberties, right? These are very complex and almost contradictory ideas, but we're clearly capable of doing that. And the American experiment is an experiment in exercising that. And so the nation state is the organizing principle of the American nation. And if the nation states can come together at the table and figure out how we can work together, because just like it works on a macro or on a micro level, it works on a macro level too, right? We are one nation of 50 states here, all working together. That doesn't mean that, oh, when something benefits California, then Arkansas gets the short end of the stick. No, actually, we want to work together to become a nation that is greater than the sum of its parts. And same idea with one world that is greater than the sum of its parts. But in doing so, you have to respect the individual parts that make up that one singular entity. You never want to get rid of the individual sovereignty for the larger entity. The larger entity should serve the individual. It's complex idea, right? I know it's easy to say one world government bad, right? But what we want is people at the table running the world together for everyone's best interest.
Right. And what we're seeing now is, you take the EU as the best example. I've always said they are the prototype for this anti-democratic, technocratic, totalitarian, globalist, supranational world government where they dissolve all 28 or however many countries are in the Union, 28 or something like that, 30, whatever. They dissolve their sovereignty and Brussels dictates to all. The latest news this morning, I saw the European Commission estimates the total level of unused savings of EU citizens at 10 trillion euros. And it intends to find ways to mobilize this money to finance its plans to militarize Europe and support the European military industrial complex. So, they're creating these asset registries, these digital passports, which across all 30 nations will control. You're going to have to ask permission if you can move around. And so that's not very, very, sovereign. Something you talk about both in your article and your recent lecture, you're getting into the paganism, the anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner, occultism. You write in the article, quote, bioregionalism is a neo-pagan occult religion that positions itself explicitly in opposition to the Platonic humanist Christian tradition that the U.S. was founded on. Its goal is not merely a scientific approach to geographically appropriate social boundaries. It's a way to hack the spiritual and philosophical foundations and underpinning our nation state, as well as in your lecture, which is linked in the description below. There's just fascinating stuff in your lecture. It was really well done. You talk about Gnosticism and just these basic ideas, which are, from my view, very wrong, pretty insane. And, what's interesting for you when it comes to sort of these sort of esoteric occult stuff that's part of all of this?
Right. Well, so this idea that Marxists push forward, right? This idea that everything is based off of material reality, and material reality is the basis for the motion of history. It can be appealing to some when you see how ideologically people operate, and it very irrationally, and they appeal to things that don't make any sense. So you say, oh, well, what about the reality of things, the hard material reality of things? But when you move past that, you get to a point where you say, well, the human mind is not, the human soul, the human mind is not based off of hard material reality. There is another thing out there that you cannot sense with your sensorious body, right? Your sensorious material body. And there's evidence of this everywhere, right? We're creative. We, just like I was saying before, we move past our own limits to growth. We're not like animals who hit a certain threshold of population and then die out. We can actually move past those thresholds. So because of this, because of our minds, we have the ability to peer into the creative universe, which we need to kind of comprehend, right? We need a guiding spiritual moral ethos, right? And this is where philosophy and morality and religion play into things. And what happened in the 20th century, or even towards the end of the 19th century, is this idea really around Darwin, right? Is that we're just monkeys, we're just animals. Trust the science, all this atheist stuff, this hyper rational atheist stuff came out, and it kind of took over our intellectual institutions, which is why you kind of get that liberal bell curve of people who, the more simple-minded folks will say, oh yes, they'll talk about God and morality and things like that. And then you start to get to the the upper crust layers of academia and of, and people get freaked out about religion, and they think that it's weird and bad and you're appealing to like a sky daddy thing because they're reacting to more of a fundamentalist, Gnostic, fake Christian religion, right? That kind of was bad in of itself as well. And they're trying to appeal to a more rational ideology. But human beings, what I'm trying to get at is that human beings need spirituality, right? We need it. We need a reason to get up in the morning. And so what happens is you get these people who become hyper rational kind of atheist types who get into Silicon Valley or they get into Wall Street, and they become hyper rational numbers people. But then they realize their souls are craving something that their rational mind can't, their numbers mind can't wrap their brain around. So what happens is there's a cultural infection of very misanthropic spirituality that sees human beings like animals, right? And sees human beings, and that's why they talk about carbon footprints, right? They see our footprint. They see us as an animal that has grown past the point of where it should be according to the numbers, right? If you look at human beings like just another animal at the zoo, then of course you're going to come to the conclusion that we're growing past the point that we're supposed to, because you can't observe human beings in an anthropological way as if we're just overgrown monkeys, right? But this is the ideology this is the spiritual ethos, the axioms that are baked into these people who, rise up through academia, and it's reinforced over and over again. And so, these you see a lot of these people who go back to the land. They have a career in Silicon Valley or Wall Street, and then they say, I hate this. I need to go back to the land. And it becomes a spiritual journey for them. And I get it too. It's nice to be touching the dirt and smelling trees. And, there's something pseudo religious about it almost, or even legitimately religious about it. But, it becomes more of a pagan style religion, and we have more evolved forms of religion and it's unfortunate that these people are, they're kind of reinventing the wheel by going back to nature.
Yeah. And some other threads, you mentioned in your talk, Stuart Brand, I think is his name. And I came across him recently with a guest I had on last year, Paul Austin, he pushes Paul Austin. He talks about third wave and psychedelics, and I learned a lot from him. He talked about Stuart Brand. I went out on Amazon and watched the documentary on Stuart Brand, and there was this fusion at the time in the 60s of cybernetics and psychedelics. Steve Jobs was hugely. There's just something there where you've got these occult, sort of esoteric, religious strain, which connects with the drugs and which connects with technology, and it's just fascinating to explore that. And you talked about, I think it was Andrew Linnell who gave a talk from this institute, and some of the ideas percolating in this space is eugenics, of course, drugs and psychedelics, I mean, just yesterday, one of the Danny Jones podcasts, which I listened to, but I'm very skeptical of, he just had guest after guest. You know, he was, and he's promoting it in a sense where the guest was talking about how he's doing DMT and basically having fun with interacting with demons. Absolutely insane. But and transhumanism as well. I feel like a lot of the strain here is wanting sort of to become gods, and Gnosticism as well. You brought that up in your speech, and I'm seeing in a lot of alternative media as well, Gnosticism coming out. There's just a content creator after content creator saying the God of the Old Testament is Satan, the demiurge. Jesus was an alien who came down. Just all this funky stuff. Just any further thoughts on this space, and maybe how that's useful to the powers that be? Because I think the powers that be also, they want to become gods. Brian Johnson just this week said he's starting his "Don't Die" movement. He actually thinks he can become immortal. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. So
yeah, what's funny about that guy is I sometimes I just read comments because I like to see how regular people react to this stuff. And somebody had such a wonderful, just some random person had a wonderful reaction to Brian Johnson, where he said, "We die because our lives mean something. If we didn't die, our lives wouldn't mean anything." So this guy, he wants to live forever. His life doesn't mean anything. I think that's what these people are afraid of. This is the whole vampire idea. The guy's a vampire, right? Is that or Saturn, the idea of Saturn eating his children, that famous Goya painting, where these people don't see a future because they're not in it. It's such an egotistical idea that, the world ceases to exist when I'm gone. And this is true. Again, I keep comparing the mindset of an animal because, yes, when my dog dies, the world does cease to exist. He doesn't have a conception of time beyond his life or before it either. He doesn't know where he came from. But as human beings, we do have this conception of life and time and space. And that's unique to us. And what we can do in our lifetimes is make our lives worthwhile by contributing to the future of humanity and expanding our species into this beautiful, almost infinite universe, right? So this idea that that you want to live forever, like, that sounds horrible. Then what's the point of getting up every morning if you're just going to eat your bran muffins and exercise for 20 hours and go to sleep? Like, what kind of a life is that? Who are you living for? You're just living for yourself. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I also feel that they're trying to create sort of a common global culture or consciousness. And so you talk about Silicon Valley, and they're trying to sell this to the liberal globalist class. They need buy-in from these, the liberal elites, which are in every country, right? In Europe, in the US, and in Mexico, where I used to live, in Kazakhstan, and in Russia. The administrative class, which runs everything, academia, the government technocrats, the businesses. And I feel like, I look at these different institutions lately. I've been looking at the Berggruen Institute, this guy, Nicholas Berggruen, who's, himself said he wants to take the baton from Bilderberg and Trilateral Commission. And he's creating this new, and his headquarters are based in LA, Venice, interestingly, and China. And he's got a lot of stuff going, publications, this planetary, this conference called The Planetary, basically. And if you look at what they're talking about, they're trying to create this planetary consciousness. So there's that on the one hand from the mainstream, but also in alternative media. I've been talking about this maybe in the last year or two, and I've been trying to raise the alarm, as Crowley says, as above, as so below, right? And so you see from alt media now this movement of agorism and going back to the land. And, I kind of do want to go back to a farm, but for the right reasons. But it feels like the ideas that they're pushing, I go to these alt media conferences, they're pushing a lot of these, sort of theosophic one world things from the bottom now in alt media. I mean, you go to alt media conferences, they're talking about, there's literally speakers citing Aleister Crowley and a lot of this freaky stuff in a good way. And so just any thoughts on what they're trying to do here and how, within alt media, you got Alex Jones now talking about rah, 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 Elon Musk and brain chips and let's integrate North America. And I'm like, wait a minute, 15 years ago, you were saying that was a bad thing. And now, centralizing control regionally is a good thing. Like what's thoughts there?
I mean, there's always going to be an effort to kind of co-opt whatever is the resistance, right? When people start resisting their cage, but the ultimate goal is to make people love of the globalists is to make people love their cage, and they want their subjects to be happy living like a gerbil, and but human beings we're not built that way. So there's always going to be a resistance. So, they stay ahead of the game with these things. And that's why people do get kind of lazy in their thinking, where they say, oh, I'm just going to trust this person and whatever they say, I get my news from them. And you can't just be a passive news consumer. And that's what's been created with this alternative media class. It's just another new mainstream media. And if you think for a second that the people in power aren't paying attention to alternative media, they aren't saying, oh, we need to control this, they've been doing it forever, it's forever. And we need to, creating systems of communication that sit outside of what is the acceptable norm is important. But it's not just a one-way transmission. People have to, on their own, do the work of thinking and reasoning and researching and getting to the truth, and knowing that they can get to the truth. They might be tricked along the way. There will always be people who will try to, be the rhetoricians or the sophists who pick up the arguments that sound very reasonable. But to not get lazy in our thinking and just say, well, okay, well, whatever they say, they're smarter than me and I trust them, whatever. No, you are built with a mind for reason, and you can find the truth yourself. It's hard and it's rigorous work, but luckily, we have the time now to look into things more because we have more automated services. You don't have to go out and farm potatoes for, 200 calories a day anymore. It's funny because the egg prices have gone up so much here. It's like $8 a carton. It's crazy. And I've raised chickens before, and it was fun. And I was thinking to myself, oh, should I raise chickens again? Is it getting really that bad? And even the economics, I plugged in the numbers and, I asked like ChatGPT, I was like, does it work? How much would it cost per egg? And it would still cost, for the first year at least, $1 to $3 per egg. So I'm like, I'm still not saving money by raising my own chickens. And then I'm just tired. And then I just have more responsibilities. I'm just like, it just does, the economics of it don't work out. And what I quickly realized is like, oh, that's right. We already figured out economics of scale. And that's why we have to utilize economics of scale, but in a way that benefits people and is not just controlled by the people at the top for their benefit. Right. So this is that struggle that is forever continuing. But if we want a real democracy, if we really want a country, a nation that operates for us, we can't be passive about it. And that's what the alternative media and the podcast empire is all about now, is saying, sit back, relax, let us tell you about the bad people. It's like, it reminds me of, did you ever see the show Unsolved Mysteries?
Oh yeah, as a kid, yeah.
Yeah. When we were kids, and it was like spooky, and it's fun getting spooked. It's like a fun, spooky little show. But at the end of the day, it's just entertainment, and a lot of this alternative media, Alex Jones in particular, is very clearly just entertainment.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, I think in my neck of the woods here, for a carton of eggs, I'm paying $2 to $3, which isn't too bad.
That's pretty good.
That's Mexico. And I think I need to vocalize this more. I assume with geopolitics and empire that people understand my thinking, I assume it's sort of implicit that you're supposed to think for yourself. You're not supposed to take what I say or my guests as gospel. I have on a left winger, I have a right winger, and then I get crap thrown at me from both sides, and it's like all of these people have some parts of the truth in their analysis, and so take what is true, what you would disagree with, throw it away. That's how we're all in this together. In the sense, we're digging through this unsolved mystery together, and it's not about, as you say, entertainment. I'm trying to figure out what in the heck, as you said earlier, what is going on. I want to know, and it's interesting solving these mysteries. And beyond that, just analyzing, where we are in the world. Some of this information we can take and use to our benefit to make better life decisions, whether it's investing or changing your own lifestyle. In your, Mark Carney, let's talk about him a bit. You just posted, you said Canada's new PM, Mark Carney, sits at the top of a deindustrialization scheme called quantitative easing for the planet, aka the Green New Deal. It was just so obvious. I said, like, way back weeks ago, months ago, I'm like, Mark Carney is going to replace Trudeau. It's just so simple. I call him the consummate Davos man. Like, and maybe you saw the clip where he said, people accuse me of being a globalist. Why, yes, I'm a globalist. We need globalism now. It's absolutely insane. He's Bank of England, Bank of Canada, Bilderberg, you name it. And just, to combine with your article again, you talk about race separatism, secession movements. And it's interesting, I recently learned, we know in the US there are states that want to secede. In Canada now, there's this talk of secession. Alberta is sending delegations to DC to petition Trump on Alberta seceding from Canada to join the US. And I learned in Mexico, I didn't even know, here in Mexico, there are states like Nuevo León who want to secede or separate from the Mexican Republic. And I kind of feel like, again, this is what you're talking about in your article. It's okay, they want to secede and become smaller, but then they want to become bigger because, the play is a North American union, and, integrating Canada with US and then Panama. And that's the technate, right, of the 1930s technocracy. So thoughts on any of this, as well as Mark Carney?
Yeah, it is a lot to unpack, isn't it? And it's conflicting ideas. Yeah, I think that there's more at play with these different groups wanting to secede or join or whatever. And somebody wrote a really thoughtful reply to my article saying they thought secession was actually a good idea because Elon Musk is trying to, take over the country and destroy Medicare and, all these terrible things. And they see secession as like a way out. Right. And the thing is, and what Kirkpatrick Sale brings up as his justifying idea is that we seceded from England. Right. But if you study the history of the US and look at our founding documents, we had a whole list of reasons, right? We were pushed to a point where we had to, and we were founding our nation based on principles that were in exact opposite to the principles of how England was operating. So, with any of these movements, why are they doing it, right? Why are they want to found a new nation based off of what? What are their founding principles? Are they saying, "Oh, we're just doing this to"? Why are they doing it? Why does Texas want to secede? Why does you said Alberta now wants to secede and become part of the U.S.? Like, what are the reasons behind these things? And I think that's really what you have to analyze. Otherwise, I think a lot of it is just games, right? Geopolitical games.
and a bit, I don't know, maybe we can say so for selfish reasons. There's a lot of people that I respect, particularly Canadians. I'm noticing now, alt media people who are, it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome. I don't know what to call it, where you would think these were the people who would be, we've all been in the same space. That we've known these plans, Bilderberg in their 1980 meeting minutes, we can go read the primary source leaked documents of 1980 Bilderberg. I used to use this primary source in my classes that I used to teach. I taught a course on North American regional scenarios. And Bilderberg says in 1980, we should create a North American community like the EU. And then you can trace it, 1989, bilateral trade agreement, Canada, USA. 5 years later, 1994, they bring in Mexico, trilateral, North American free trade. Then you have Prosperity Partnership in the 2000s, and so on. And so where am I going with this? And some of these Canadians are kind of saying, yes, please save us. It's like they've destroyed Canada so bad, and now they're like, well, things are so bad. I guess the less worse option would be to join the United States. And so,
yeah.
But Mark Carney, any thoughts there? They're putting these technocrats into power. Starmer in UK, Carney in Canada. Thoughts on that, as well as where we are with the degrowth movement that you touch on a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think Canada needs its own real kind of national convention, right? They need to establish. They're still like a member of the Commonwealth, right? They're still, for all things considered, they're part of the crown, right? They're still part of the legacy of the British Empire. They still answer to the king, so they need to become more of their own sovereign nation, which they're not. I mean, it's sad to see somebody like Mark Carney running their nation. He's even worse than Trudeau, right? In some regards, I'd say. Probably, I don't know. I haven't followed Trudeau that closely. They both seem like, I think Trudeau was more of a puppet. He was more like analogous to like a Bush character, and Mark Carney is actually working towards very evil ends. So this Green New Deal thing, again, another FDR idea that has been twisted into something that to stand for its complete opposite, right? The New Deal was about national sovereignty. It was about growth orientation. It was about energy consumption. It was about growing energy consumption. It was about building out energy infrastructure within our country, and then further through the Pan-American continent. So now we have the Green New Deal, which was originated in England and has now become imported into the US and, of course, Canada. And the Green New Deal is all about reducing energy consumption. This is like the backbone of the program, is to reduce our carbon footprint and to reduce energy consumption. So why is that? Why was this a complete paradigm shift in our orientation, in a growth orientation towards a degrowth orientation? And Mark Carney, he's a central banker whose interests, I suppose, his monetarist interests, not his interests as a human being, as part of this planet. He thinks that he wants to stay on top, and in order to keep peoples under the boot of a supranational world order, you need to divide and conquer. This is like Roman Empire stuff all over again. This solar panels, it's all like a Ponzi scheme. It's all a monetarist Ponzi scheme. It's Keynesian economics of just creating money out of thin air. And then you get hyperinflation, and then you've created the conditions for your authoritarians to come in and your fascism to happen. And then they say, oh no, we don't want that. We want democracy. We want our subjects to love us and pretend like they have agency in this one world order when they don't. And Mark Carney is an important figure in all this, because he's at the top of the chain. So I deal with a lot of people, on a local level, who are trying to support this Green New Deal and undermine. I live in New York State, so it's a very important battleground state for the nation. So they feel like if they can do things here, it's the first domino throughout the nation. And right now, New York has some of the most ridiculous climate laws in the country, where we already are so low emission. We passed a law with the liberal government that's in charge, even though our state is mostly red. But we have this overarching liberal government, basically at the beck and call of Wall Street, that says, oh no, we have to reduce our emissions even more and more and more and more now, which is ridiculous because it's only going to cost us money and it's not going to do anything for the world. The world emissions don't just say, oh, well, New York State is going down. Africa is going to develop. And this has been one of the huge bright spots of the Trump campaign is I can't remember the guy's name. I wish I could remember it, but his energy policy guy is saying Africa needs to develop. Africa needs fossil fuels. And this is the moral quandary of the world right now is Africa and Asia have been kept under the boot of empire and the central bankers who want to keep it from industrializing. But now we're entering a new era where we're not in charge anymore. And nations like Russia and China are saying, you know what, let's end colonialism. Let's let the rest of the world develop. And we should be going right along with that because that's the policy, the real American policy put forth by all the greatest American leaders is this idea of win-win cooperation, Pan-American development, world development. I bring up a guy named Gilpin, who is in opposition to a guy named John Wesley Powell. And Gilpin was a close associate of Lincoln. And so Gilpin's idea was to have this international railway, the Cosmopolitan Railway. He's got a whole book on it. I have right here. It's a very old book. It's the Cosmopolitan Railway, compacting and fusing together all the world's continents. And who has picked up the torch in doing that? So that's the World Land Bridge, right? That's the Chinese have been leading that effort. And nothing would be more American than for us to join them in that effort. And so when you look at history, you can start to see where the battle lines actually are. And it has nothing to do with left or right. It's about, do we want the world to develop and live in peaceful coexistence and have sovereignty for the individual? Or do we want to live under a supranational world order, under Mark Carney's 1.5 degrees Celsius society, where we can't raise our degree, we can't raise the temperature of the planet, otherwise we all explode. It's fear. They're running the world on these ideas of like fear and collapse and doom, and it's really awful.
It's even here in Mexico, it's interesting to see what you're talking about. There are countries now these ideas as you say, have been around for centuries. Railroads, Mexico used to have railroads, the oil barons snuffed that out. And now we see all of a sudden Mexico, all these projects, AMLO and now Scheinbaum, building mass railroads across the country. I just heard yesterday they're going to build massive water infrastructure, new electric stuff. And so but at the same time, you have this globalist strain here in Mexico, and the same thing in other countries, as you're pointing out, where they're trying to do good things, build out this infrastructure, and then you have policies that are trying to totalitarian, trying to keep us down and controlled. And I don't hold anyone on a pedestal. You mentioned FDR a lot. I felt like he pushed a lot of sort of collectivist ideas, but no one's perfect. And I had a guest on recently, a while back, maybe they brought up FDR, and one of my commenters on Substack pointed out you can't poo-poo on everything. FDR brought in mass electrification, and I had no idea. I had to look it up, and I'm like, before FDR, there wasn't very much electricity infrastructure. And so through the program that he brought in, maybe it was 37, I don't remember what year, it was, he brought in mass electrification, which we're all using now, thanks to that. And so I think we have to be careful. I always stress nuance, there's the good, bad, and ugly for everyone. And so we can't just black and white, just throw stones at everyone. And maybe just your further thought on the degrowth agenda, if you think they're going to succeed. We see places like UK, you mentioned, came out of UK, and it seems like UK is ground zero. Airstrip one is ground. They're bringing in, I call it death zero, the ULEZ, right? If they're trying to make it so if if the car leaves your driveway, they're going to charge you, 10 pounds It's absolutely insane. The carbon social tracking here in my banking app in Mexico now, they've introduced the carbon social tracking. So it's just informative now. So I use mostly cash, so they got not much on me. But for people who pay digitally, it's tracking how much energy you're using, gasoline, and all that. And even the emissions test. I was looking at this yesterday here in Mexico. They brought this in 2 years ago. Before that, in Mexico, you didn't have to do vehicle emissions. And I was looking at the policy on the Mexican website and the government. It says the question, the frequently asked question says, if my car doesn't pass emissions, is it like illegal? Can I still use it? And effectively, the conclusion is, and they use the government language. It's no. Like if your car doesn't pass the test, your car is illegal. You can't use it. And I know people who that's happened to, and they try to say, well, you just got to fix your car or pass it through a second or a third time. And they try to politely say, yeah, you can't drive it if it doesn't pass the test. And that's part of that degrowth agenda. And so just your thoughts, do you think how successful do you think they're going to be in trying to implement a degrowth? I guess particularly in the West, UK, Europe, Canada, USA, places like here in Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, they've been pretty successful. I think degrowth is something that's been around for a while, but it's only been talked about formally, for 20 years, and it's only gotten popular in the last few. But now, it's such an alienating term. Most people are just instinctually turned off by it, so they kind of have to. They're always kind of rebranding it. But as far as long term with Europe goes, yeah, they're in a pretty bad spot. I think that another positive development with Trump's administration, I will say it's a huge mixed bag. I don't like Elon. I don't like the TL elements at all. But there are some positive developments with his administration. I think that pulling out of this special relationship with the UK and, basically pulling the muscle away from Europe as this totalitarian bully, one world order degrowth state, it'll be hard growing pains for for Europe, but they do need to turn course, right? And I think like Orban is a positive development, but it's so funny what you have to be careful with liberals, because the minute you don't do democracy the way they want you to do democracy, they suddenly turn into very fascist, authoritarian types, right? And they say, no, we don't want you to say that. We want democracy. We want you to say it our way. So it's very contradictory, and it's very nasty. Europe does need to redevelop. And I think that there are poles in the world, this multipolarity, that will help facilitate that. But Europe's been down and out for a long time. And I don't envy Europeans who have to deal with all these weird government restrictions. So.
No, it's absolutely insane. I mean, soon I'm going to have to ask permission to go back to Europe with the European, the electronic travel authorization. I've already seen Americans been denied travel to UK because, again, these are social credit forms. And so they're screening people. Oh, we don't like the way you think. You can't visit UK. I'm lucky I have a European passport, but I still got to ask permission for the rest of my family who are not yet Europeans. Is absolutely crazy. You mentioned the mixed bag of the Trump administration. I know you've done a doc on RFK Jr. I made a joke the other day. I made a comment. I posted a video where he's going after the COVID killers, and it was a joke. He was having a steak and shake with Sean Hannity. It's kind of like, where was all this? He was hardcore before he got in. He was going to do all this stuff, and now it's kind of like, oh, we're forgetting about all of that. Just any thoughts on folks like RFK Jr.?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts. So yeah, my next documentary series is going to be all about him, and there is a lot of baggage, but I mean, so yeah, he was early on the anti-vax thing, and he happened to be on the what seems like the right side of the issue. And what people are going to learn the hard way about him is that he's very, very good at paying lip service to people who have some sort of moral, righteous indignation about something. But he doesn't believe in any of it himself. He's a liar. And he's a very convincing liar. Studying his career, the things he said, the bridges that he's burned. So before he was a COVID truther guy, he was an anti-vaxxer. He was a hardcore environmentalist. Hardcore. Like he was mentored by the woman who wrote Silent Spring, Rachel Carson, who basically, founded the environmental movement in the 60s, raising alarm bells about DDT, which actually came from the scientific work of the anthroposophy community. So this is all going to come out in the documentary. It's a lot. But yes, a cult religion that based itself off of agriculture and worshiping Gaia, right? A sort of pagan theosophical religion was the scientific foundation of our environmental movement. And this is what influenced Kennedy. He had a hard life growing up. His family was murdered. He's got a lot of really bad people in his family too. And he had a drug problem, right? So this guy, he's got a lot of problems. And I think that he's learned to cope with his existence in a lot of really unhealthy ways. And one of them is being very manipulative about the things that he says that he's for. And he likes playing this kind of David versus Goliath figure, the little guy fighting but he is a big guy. He's a Kennedy, he's a huge name. And he's got a very, very influential family. So what people in the COVID movement are going to find out very quickly is, or maybe not, I don't know, people have a hard time remembering things, but he's a liar. So he's probably going to come out as hypocritical about a lot of things at some point. It frustrates me to see so many people trusting him, but I know I just have to wait because he will eventually come out as a liar. Like I said, people in the environmental movement, he used to be a liberal, poster boy, but they hate him now because he's kind of full of shit and he'll say whatever he has to kind of win people over. He'll play the rhetoric game. He'll get on the soapbox. He'll say all the things that make people clap, do the mic drop. But I think he's just kind of learned how to do that. He doesn't really have very good principles, if any. And what's funny, if you look throughout his history, he bashed Trump throughout his entire career. So watching him join the Trump cabinet has been really bizarre, but it just goes to show how much is just constructed to influence public opinion and control public opinion and dissent.
I'm looking forward to your that next film. And I've lately been coming, I used to donate to Children's Health Defense, and it's like, yeah, I'm done with that. I basically don't, even Highwire, Del Bigtree, and he's, Del is kind of part of that RFK train, and there's like very few places they'll send money anymore. And was going to say that I've been coming to the same conclusion as you've been. I fully agree with you here. He seems like an opportunist, RFK Jr. Yeah. And as soon as you get close to that Ring of Power, Lord of the Rings, the books are better than the film, but I still very much enjoy the film. And it's
also influenced by anthroposophy.
Yeah, I will have to talk. Just a real quick. I figured Tolkien was a Catholic and he was using it as like an analogy for the Bible. Just real quick, how was the influence there? Right.
So he was part of a literary group called the Inklings. Are you aware of this? J.R. Tolkien, that's what his name was, right? Tolkien, right? And I can't remember the name. There was if we Google this real quick, Inklings. And one of the main Inklings was a guy who was a guy named Owen Barfield. And Owen Barfield was very influential on Tolkien, and he was an avowed a founding father of anthroposophy in the English-speaking world, is what it says on his Wikipedia page. So yeah, there are some similar themes in anthroposophy and in Lord of the Rings. There's a book about it, I think, out there about anthroposophy and Lord of the Rings that you can look into. But yeah, there were a group of authors in that time. I think C.S. Lewis was also part of the Inklings. Yeah, C.S. Lewis. So it's all these guys kind of writing, and like that Huxley, like all this non-science fiction stuff kind of is born in that era of the eugenics time, right? Where it's an interest. We can go down a whole rabbit hole about it, but cultural influence at its founding.
I'm a fan of Lewis and Tolkien, and I mean, they're writing fiction, and I give him some leeway in terms of literary terms, being able to throw in different influences. But just back on Kennedy, I'm just I've come to that same conclusion. He's an opportunist, and as soon as he gets close to that ring of power, he kind of like I'm in the club now. See you guys. Lately, I've been using as an example. Indecent Proposal with Demi Moore, Woody Harrelson, and Robert Redford. Remember that movie where I think Woody and Demi were married in the film, and this rich man, Robert Redford, liked Demi. He's like, let me just have dinner once with your wife, Demi Moore. And, you think nothing's going to happen. And Demi's like, she's tasted the rich life, and she's like, sorry, Woody, I want to stay with the rich guy. And that's kind of how I feel like RFK. And the thing that really boggles my mind, though, as you said, you listen to some of his speeches in the early 2020s, like in Germany, he gave this masterful speech against COVID 1984, the dictatorship, and he just seems so authentic. Even Alex Jones, like this, I bring him up because I was inspired by many people, including Alex Jones, starting this podcast. And it's like, but you just seem so authentic. But you're not. I just can't square that peg. And I think what explains it is a bit of, I don't know, narcissism, sociopathy, that you're able to be so, both authentic, because narcissists are very good at what they do. They are able to come across as authentic. Meanwhile, they're doing the opposite. Just any thought there?
I think you're absolutely right. And it actually makes me feel better that you're noticing this too, because for a while it felt like I was the only person who noticed this, because liberals, they just hate him now. And now right wingers are like, wow, he's so brilliant and he speaks. And that's what's really revolting about somebody who knows how to play people on a psychological level. And they're doing so while knowing what they're doing and kind of picking at them on a moral level and a soul level, and it is disgusting to me. That's why, and I try not to like hate anyone, and I try to understand. That's why I always try to bring it back to like, he had a hard childhood, and I'm sure he was surrounded by really awful people, and the drugs. You brought up before about drugs being pushed on people, and I think it does destroy people's minds in a way where they kind of they numb out. They numb out to the world. And I pity him, and I feel frustrated by him and all the people he's duped. And that's what compels me to make these films, that hopefully someday people will recognize that they're being duped, because once you do realize it, it can make you feel really bitter and really frustrated about what's going on. And this is why we have to build up again, like our own muscle for figuring out the truth. And with him, what you find so quickly are the contradictions in what he's saying. He's so contradictory. And it's hard to reckon with, because then I think most people they give other people the benefit of the doubt, and they don't say, you could be a sociopath. And it's hard to comprehend, and it's hard to diagnose somebody as that. But once you get to that level with him, where you're like, you were saying the exact opposite thing 6 months ago. Did you believe what you were saying then? Or do you believe what you're saying now? And the truth is, I don't even think it's about believing what he's saying. He has learned, I think, through coping, being a handsome Kennedy guy, that he kind of has an effect on people, and maybe he used that to his benefit. I'm not sure.
No, I agree with you, and I don't hate anyone or really get angry. It's just kind of like, okay, he's been outed. Back to the drawing board. Let's move
Yeah.
on. Find other people to work with that are on our same frequency and seeing what we're seeing, and let's move forward again. Forget Kennedy.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? As we wind down here on geopolitics and the East. What's going on there? On the one hand, it seems like the U.S. is extending a hand to Moscow, but it seems like they're going to, in order to pivot to the east, and we're seeing Europe go insane. I listen to many different analysts, not only in the English-speaking world, but in the Spanish-speaking world, in the Croatian-speaking world, in Russia. And it looks like Europe, a lot of them are saying Europe is now trying to arm to the teeth. You see Germany talking about getting nukes. You see Poland talking about getting nukes. Frau Ursula Gertrude von der Leyen, as I call her, wants to rearm for 800 billion, like absolute insanity. So it's like a lot of analysts are saying we're doing this again. The third time around, where Europe's going to march on Moscow. But any thoughts on the geopolitical space where we're at with BRICS, multipolarity, East, West, all that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's scary to think about. And, I haven't been keeping up to, I find these like update, because the world's changing so fast right now, right? Since Trump got into office, there's so many things in play right now. Even with his conversation in the White House with Zelensky, you could see almost several things happening at once. And I think that there's an element within the Trump administration that is trying to pull away from this Anglo-American bully empire. But then there's also elements clearly with Vance, Thiel, Musk that do believe in that. They're Nazis, right? It's the Nazi element that's not going to go down without a fight. So we're in a situation now where we'll have to see how things play out. I thank God that Putin seems like a very level-headed person, and that he's surrounded mostly with people who are being level-headed and diplomatic, and he's navigated so brilliantly for his nation after they were forcefully deindustrialized and collapsed. And we don't want the same thing to happen here in the US, and hopefully we won't. We can regain, and this is why energy is so important, right? Is when you create these conditions for energy and for infrastructure and for prosperity, is that's when the tensions for war start to wither away, right? And this is like the world we have to work towards, is not just the ceasefire, which, yeah, we want to stop fighting. We have to work towards we have to make sure people see a future, because if people don't see a future, they're more willing to hit the nuke button, right? And nuke it. Say, well, if I'm dead, everyone's coming with me. No, we need the future orientation. And that's, why China and Russia are kind of leading the world right now. And if we can represent the best of Western culture and say, we are future oriented as well, we want to join the table as adults, we want to build the world, and then we can slowly walk away from this military buildup from these suicidal vampires who want to live forever and or kill everyone on their way out, So yeah, I haven't been monitoring the situation very closely because it is upsetting, but I do have hope for the players at the table, and I hope the better elements of the Trump administration pull through and pull the U.S. and the greater Western institutions out of this catastrophic situation we're in.
Well, yeah, you've been going down the theosophy and RFK Jr. Rabbit hole, but what was I going to say? Yeah, I my fear is, as you mentioned, you don't want that happening in the U.S., and I feel like we are at a crossroads, and some of it may not be up to us. It might be the system crashing. Sergei Glaziev keeps putting out in his Telegram, I share his stuff, the Russian economist, thinker, he's saying that the U.S. is going to experience its own sort of Soviet collapse moment. I've had Dmitry Orlov on the podcast. That's been his thesis. He wrote books on that for many years and decades, where what happened to Russia in the 90s, that's going to happen to us with the potential collapse of the U.S. dollar. I've interviewed the late Johan Galtung, who's been on the podcast. You know, he passed not long ago in his 90s. In 1980, he said the Soviet Union will collapse in 1990, which it did. And he told me that he initially thought U.S. would collapse in 2020. He revised it before his death to 2025. Here we are, 2025, and the Trump administration is scrambling to do something about the dollar, like, you know, Bitcoin strategic reserve, digital dollar, like the ship is going down. What do we do? Get rid of the income tax. I'll take that. Howard Lutnick came out this week saying anyone making less than 150 grand a year, no income tax, I'll take that. Please, I don't want to deal with I'm dealing, you know, the filing reports, all that stuff is insane, but we've covered a lot. Fox, you know, Hail Hydra. You know, I watched the Captain America movies recently for the first time, and Hail Hydra, where the Nazis continue on afterward. And it's kind of what you said. Those elements are still around us today in the West. You know, any other thoughts on the road ahead, or anything else? Final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're right. We are headed towards collapse if we don't do something, we don't change things. And that's where it ties back to Mark Carney, right? And the Green New Deal, and the people within our own government who are trying to push for a Green New Deal and a further deindustrialized world, a post-growth world, will collapse on itself. And that's where the Trump administration, again, is a mixed bag, because he is seemingly pro-industry and pro-growth, but I don't think that all these different monetary schemes are going to help us in the long run. We need a monetary system that's based off of a physical economy, so it has to go hand in hand with industrialization. So that's really the key, and that's where, yeah, all these things that are happening in Europe and in the rest of the world seem so far off. But what matters, what we do in our backyard does matter. And we need to take part in preventing the deindustrialization of our countries. And we need to grow. We need jobs. We need a real physical economy, and not just Wall Street and Silicon Valley speculation. This is what's going to prevent us from collapsing. It's what helped Russia get back on its feet again after their collapse. So, you know, look at the people who were in charge at the very end of the Soviet Union were complete Malthusians, who were into this post-growth world. And that's why it doesn't matter whether you're capitalist or socialist, because at the end of the day, if you don't believe in growth and you don't believe in the potential of a human being and the human mind to create a world beyond its, you know, material limits, then you're doomed. You are going to be doomed. And so, yeah, we're in a very tough spot right now, but, you know, part of being a patriot is sticking with your people, even in the hardest times. It's not just saying, well, it sucks here, I gotta go, let's break up the union, let's collapse. No, these are the hard times, is when, you know, when it counts for the future. So
yeah, so I sometimes get that criticism. Oh, I left the U.S. It's like I've always, since birth, been a dual national, Croatian and American, and now I'm also a Mexican citizen. So you can't say I left the U.S. because I'm Mexican now. So if I leave Mexico, I'd be giving up on my country of Mexico. So I can sort of legally defend myself, and you know, I just ended up.
Yeah, but you stand for kind of an international patriotism, which is very cool. I think you seem like a person who, because you've lived in so many places, you have this like worldliness and honesty, a perspective on the world that's good, and you're bringing that perspective to people. So.
Well, I want to defend the sovereignty of Mexico, of USA, of Croatia. I lived in Kazakhstan, and I was warning the Kazakhs about a coming color revolution. I told the guy, I actually had the head of internal security in the city meet me, and I one of my students was taking part in activities of Open Society USAID National Endowment for Democracy. She actually showed me a certificate that she got from National Endowment, and I'm like, oh, they're preparing. My country of America is preparing to overthrow Kazakhstan. I don't want that. I want Kazakhstan to be sovereign. And I left in 2020, and then January of 2022, we saw this in Astana, these riots, which seemed like a color revolution attempt, which failed. And I had warned of that years prior. But just, final thought, what you were saying this week for my paid subscribers and in my analysis, I was mentioning, some interesting chatter where Trump was talking about rebuilding the shipbuilding maritime industry. There are articles coming out rebuilding aviation industry in the U.S. And stuff like this. So I guess we'll see what happens. Where all of your links are in the description, Fox. But where are the best places people can find you, your projects, ways to support you, and all that?
Yeah, spacecommune.com has links to our podcast has been on hold for a while, but you can find us the YouTube channel, or Space Commune on YouTube, Substack. We've been putting most of our effort into Substack, but I will have the next installment of Energy Empire at some point this year. It's going to be the biggest one. It's probably going to be like an hour and a half. So it's a good build up. There's the first one is 20 minutes. Next one, the second one that I put out last year is like almost an hour. Next one is going to be like an hour and a half. So it's going to be a 5-part series eventually. So check that out. But in the meantime, we try to keep it flowing with our written work on Substack. So Space Commune on Substack. I also have a new project called American Thesis, which I have one article out for. On Substack, you can look at that as well. So yeah, follow us, throw us a few bucks if you want to keep supporting what we're doing, because we could sure use it. It's always great to have that encouragement of having, people like, subscribe, follow, throw us a few bucks here and there. So
yeah, we're all in that same boat financially. And so, but at the very least, I always tell listeners, just go to Fox's X account. Just the free stuff like following and sharing is a big help. So just follow him on X, so he can grow. Follow him on Substack. Subscribe to the list there. Follow the YouTube channel and all that. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Fox.
Thank you, Herway. It's great to talk to you.